Oh, you absolutely must meet Amelia's new fiancé, my stepmom, Brenda chirped, her hand clamped around my younger sister's wrist like a designer manacle. He's just so impressive. A real go-getter. Director of operations at a major tech firm. They're based in Silicon Valley, of course. A wave of murmurs rippled through the gathered neighbors and family friends. This was Brenda's favorite party trick, using my sister's accomplishments, or in this case, her fiancé's, as a way to subtly, or not so subtly, diminish me. I was the artistic one, a phrase she always delivered with a pitying little head tilt, as if my career as a lead designer at one of the world's most innovative software companies was a quaint little hobby, like knitting or collecting decorative spoons. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest, a dull ache of resentment I'd carried for years. I was standing by the grill, a plate of rapidly cooling food in my hand, trying to project an aura of unbothered calm. My dad caught my eye from across the patio and gave me a small, apologetic grimace. He knew her game. He'd been a passive observer to it for 15 years. Amelia looked deeply uncomfortable, her smile stretched thin. "Brenda, please," she mumbled, trying to tug her arm free. My sister and I had our issues, a tangled history of rivalry and reconciliation, but in these moments we were united in our shared suffering under Brenda's reign. "Nonsense, darling," Brenda boomed, pulling a young man forward. "Everyone, this is Mark. Mark, say hello to our dear Maya." She gestured towards me, her smile dripping with saccharine condescension. "Maya is creative. She makes things pretty on the computer." The small crowd chuckled politely. I felt my face flush, a hot, prickly wave of humiliation. This was her masterpiece. In one fell swoop, she'd introduced her prize son-in-law-to-be and reduced my entire career to the digital equivalent of finger painting. Mark stepped forward, a polite, practiced smile on his face. He was handsome, in a generic stock photo kind of way. Crisp polo shirt, perfectly coiffed hair, a watch that probably cost more than my first car. He extended his hand. "A pleasure to meet you, Maya. Amelia has told me so much about you." His voice was smooth, confident, but as our eyes met, his smile faltered. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face, confusion, then dawning horror. His skin, so perfectly tanned a moment ago, seemed to pale several shades. His outstretched hand froze in midair. The name, the title, the company he supposedly worked for, it all clicked into place with a sickening, gut-wrenching lurch. The air crackled. The cheerful party sounds, the sizzle of the grill, the laughter, the distant splash from the pool, all faded into a dull, roaring hum in my ears. My own polite, forced smile dissolved. "Mark," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, cutting through the sudden silence that had fallen over our little group. I didn't take his hand. I couldn't. Brenda, ever the oblivious orchestrator, beamed. "See? They're hitting it off already." Mark's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air. His eyes darted from me to my sister, then back to me, wide with a panic I knew all too well. I let the silence hang for another beat, a delicious, terrible pause. Then I gave him a smile that didn't reach my eyes, a cold, sharp smile I reserved for very special occasions. "It's funny," I said, my voice resonating with a newfound, chilling clarity. "I don't recall approving your vacation time for this little family gathering, and we really need to talk about your performance on the Q3 projections. They were subpar." The blood drained completely from Mark's face. My sister Amelia stared at me, her jaw slack with disbelief, and Brenda's triumphant smile collapsed, replaced by a mask of utter bewildered shock. The successful, impressive fiancé she'd just spent the last 10 minutes bragging about, the man who was supposed to be my ultimate humiliation, was the junior project manager I had personally put on a performance improvement plan just last week. He didn't work at a tech firm in Silicon Valley. He worked under me. But how did we get here? How did my life become this twisted, made-for-TV melodrama playing out on my dad's perfectly manicured lawn? To understand that, you have to understand my family. You have to go back to the beginning. My mother passed away from cancer when I was 12, and Amelia was 8. Her death left a crater in our lives, a gaping void that my father, a kind but emotionally reserved man, didn't know how to fill. For 2 years, our house was a quiet gray place, haunted by memories and the lingering scent of my mom's lavender perfume. We were a trio of grieving souls, adrift in a sea of sorrow, clinging to each other like life rafts. Then Brenda entered the picture. She was a whirlwind of bright colors, loud laughter, and aggressive cheerfulness. A real estate agent with a shark's smile and an iron will, she was the polar opposite of my gentle, soft-spoken mother. Dad met her at a grief counseling group, a detail that, in hindsight, is drenched in irony, as Brenda seemed constitutionally incapable of processing any emotion more complex than smug satisfaction. She moved in 6 months later, and our quiet gray house was suddenly awash in beige carpets, faux Tuscan decor, and the suffocating scent of vanilla-scented candles. Brenda didn't just redecorate our home, she tried to redecorate our lives. She signed me up for cheerleading tryouts. I spent the entire time reading a book in the bleachers, and pushed Amelia into beauty pageants. Amelia, to everyone's surprise, actually enjoyed them. Her mission was clear: to mold us into the daughters she believed my father, and, by extension, society, wanted. Amelia, younger and more malleable, became her star pupil. She was pretty, popular, and eager to please. I, on the other hand, was the problem child. I was quiet, introverted, and preferred the company of code to the company of people. I spent my teenage years hunched over a clunky desktop computer in my room, teaching myself graphic design and HTML. "All that time on the computer will rot your brain, Maya," Brenda would say, her voice laced with a concern that felt more like a judgment. "You should be out with friends, meeting nice boys." My father would just sigh, caught in the crossfire. "She's happy, Brenda. Let her be." But Brenda couldn't let it be. My refusal to fit into her prescribed mold was a personal affront. She saw my passion for technology not as a potential career, but as a weird, unsociable hobby. It was something to be managed, downplayed, and, if possible, gently mocked. The rivalry between me and Amelia was a flame fanned by Brenda's constant comparisons. "Oh, Amelia made the homecoming court. Isn't that wonderful?" she'd announce at dinner, while I was celebrating, getting my first freelance web design gig. "Maya, did you hear? Amelia's boyfriend is the captain of the football team," she'd crow, just as I was explaining how I'd built a dynamic database for a local charity, pro bono. Amelia, caught up in the glow of Brenda's approval, played her part perfectly. She became the golden child, the one who fulfilled all of Brenda's suburban dreams. We drifted apart, our sisterly bond eroded by years of whispered comparisons and manufactured competition. We lived in the same house, but we existed in different universes. I poured all my frustration, all my hurt, all my ambition into my work. While Amelia was going to prom, I was learning Java. While she was at cheer camp, I was mastering Photoshop. The digital world was my sanctuary, a place where my skills were valued, where logic reigned, and where Brenda's opinions were irrelevant. My computer screen was a shield, protecting me from the constant, low-grade hum of disapproval that permeated my home life. My hard work paid off. I got a full scholarship to Carnegie Mellon for their design and technology program. The day my acceptance letter arrived was one of the few times I remember seeing a crack in Brenda's polished facade. She couldn't spin this. A full ride to a top-tier university wasn't something you could dismiss as a cute hobby. "Well, that's nice, dear," she'd said, her smile tight. "But Pittsburgh is so gray, and what will you even do with a degree like that?" I knew exactly what I would do. I would get as far away from her and her suffocating expectations as possible. I would build a life so successful, so undeniably impressive, that she would have no choice but to choke on her condescending little remarks. It was a petty, vengeful motivation, I'll admit. But it was a powerful one. College was my liberation. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who got it, people who spoke my language, who saw the world in lines of code and pixels. I thrived. I graduated summa cum laude and was immediately headhunted by a dozen tech companies. I chose Innovate, a fast-growing software company in San Francisco known for its groundbreaking user interface designs. It was my dream job. I moved to California and didn't look back. My relationship with my dad improved over the phone, free from Brenda's constant editorializing. My contact with Amelia was sporadic, birthday texts, Christmas calls. She'd stayed in our hometown, gone to a local state college, and was now working in marketing for a regional department store chain. She was living the life Brenda had designed for her, and, from all appearances, she seemed happy. I, on the other hand, was excelling in a world Brenda couldn't even begin to comprehend. I climbed the ladder at Innovate with a relentless, single-minded focus. I went from junior designer to lead designer, and then, after spearheading a project that tripled our user engagement, I was promoted to head of the entire user experience department. I was managing a team of 25 brilliant, talented people. I was making more money than I'd ever imagined. I was respected, I was fulfilled, and I made sure Brenda knew it. Not directly, of course. That wasn't my style. But I'd casually drop my new title into conversations with my dad, knowing he'd repeat it. I'd post pictures of my sleek, minimalist apartment, with its panoramic views of the Golden Gate Bridge. I let my success speak for itself. The dynamic had shifted. Brenda could no longer dismiss me. Instead, she pivoted. She began to treat my career as a strange, esoteric anomaly, something too complex and techy for normal people to understand. "Oh, Maya does something with widgets and cloud servers," she'd say, waving her hand dismissively, as if I were an eccentric scientist tinkering with mysterious, unknowable forces. Meanwhile, she doubled down on her praise for Amelia. Amelia's life was relatable. Amelia's job was understandable. And when Amelia got engaged, Brenda went into overdrive. "You won't believe him, Maya," she'd gushed over the phone. "He's so handsome, so charming, and successful. He's a director of operations at a big tech company. Sound familiar?" The unspoken implication was clear. "See? Your sister has caught up to you. She's landed a man who is your professional equal. She wins." I was, I'll admit, a little intrigued. Amelia had never been particularly ambitious. Her boyfriends in the past had been a string of pleasant, unremarkable local guys. A director of operations in Silicon Valley was a major step up. "What's his name?" I'd asked. "Mark Peterson," Brenda had said. "You'll love him." The name didn't register. It was a common enough name. Innovate was a big company, and I didn't know everyone. And the director of operations title threw me off. It sounded senior, important. Miles above the pay grade of anyone I managed directly. The annual summer barbecue was to be their grand debut as a couple. My dad had called me, his voice tinged with a familiar weariness. "Please try to come, honey. It would mean a lot to me, and to Amelia. Brenda is... well, she's being Brenda about the whole thing. You know how she gets." I knew. And a part of me, the petty, vengeful part that had been forged in the fires of my teenage years, couldn't resist. I wanted to see this paragon of success for myself. I wanted to size him up, to see if he was truly the man who could finally give Brenda the ammunition she needed to declare Amelia the winner in our lifelong one-sided competition. So I booked a flight. I braced myself for a weekend of passive-aggressive comments, pitying looks, and endless, gushing praise for Mark the director. I was ready for a fight. I just never imagined I'd win it so spectacularly, so completely, and before the appetizers had even gotten cold. The silence that followed my pronouncement was deafening. The half-dozen people who had gathered to witness this little family drama looked like they'd been flash frozen. My dad's tongs clattered against the side of the grill. Brenda's face was a kaleidoscope of confusion, denial, and dawning fury. Amelia was the first to break the spell. Maya, what are you talking about? She whispered, her eyes wide and pleading. Mark is a director of operations. I finally looked at Mark, who seemed to have shrunk by several inches. Are you Mark? I asked, my voice soft but laced with steel. Because on your employment paperwork and on the internal directory at Innovate, the company where I am the head of user experience, it says, your title is Junior Project Manager. A junior project manager who, as I recall, is currently on a performance improvement plan for, and I quote from my own report, a consistent failure to meet deadlines and a demonstrated lack of strategic initiative. A collective gasp went through the small crowd. It was brutal, it was savage, and it was the most satisfying thing I had ever done in my life. Years of swallowed insults, of gritting my teeth, of forcing myself to rise above, it all fell away in that one glorious, truth-laced tirade. Mark finally found his voice, though it was a reedy, pathetic squeak. There must be some misunderstanding. No, I don't think there is, I said, taking a deliberate step closer. I was a predator, and he was my cornered prey. I think you've been lying, to my sister, to my family, about your job, about your seniority, about your entire professional life. Director of Operations is a nice, vague, impressive-sounding title. It's perfect for someone who wants to sound like a big shot without having any actual accomplishments to back it up. But the thing about lying, Mark, is that the world is a lot smaller than you think. Brenda finally snapped out of her stupor. That's enough, Maya, she shrieked, her voice cracking. You are being cruel. You're just jealous of your sister's happiness. I turned my cold gaze on her. Jealous? Brenda, I have spent the last 15 years listening to you belittle my choices, mock my career, and treat me like a second-class citizen in my own family. You have used my sister as a weapon against me, constantly comparing us, constantly trying to prove that her life, the life you approved of, was better than mine. And now you bring this fraud into our home and present him as the ultimate prize, the final proof of your victory. You didn't want Amelia to be happy. You wanted her to beat me. Well, congratulations, Brenda. Your prize-winning racehorse is a fraud. What does that say about your judgment? Brenda looked like I had physically struck her. Her mouth opened and closed, but for the first time in her life, she was speechless. All eyes were now on Amelia. Tears were streaming down her face, carving clean paths through her perfect makeup. She looked at Mark, her expression a heartbreaking mix of betrayal and devastation. Mark, she sobbed, is it true? Mark couldn't meet her eyes. He stared at his expensive, boat-shoed feet, his entire facade of confident success crumbling into dust. His silence was his confession. It was a horrifying, magnificent car crash of a scene, and I was the one who had lit the match. A part of me, the part that had been hurt and belittled for so long, reveled in the destruction. But another part, a deeper, more compassionate part, felt a pang of something that felt dangerously like pity. I looked at my sister, my beautiful, popular, golden child sister, and saw a woman whose world had just been shattered, and I was the one holding the hammer. Brenda, recovering her voice, went on the offensive. You did this on purpose. You've always been jealous of her. You couldn't stand to see her happy with a successful man, so you had to tear him down. My dad finally intervened. Brenda, that's enough, he said, his voice firm in a way it rarely was with her. He put his arm around me. Maya is just telling the truth. It's Mark who has some explaining to do. Mark, seeing his support system evaporate, finally broke. I was going to tell her, he blurted out, his voice cracking. I wanted to impress you all. Her family. Brenda told me how important success was, how much she admired people who were directors. He shot a venomous look at my stepmom. Amelia let out a gut-wrenching sob and turned and fled into the house. The party was over. The guests, sensing the emotional shrapnel that was about to fly, began to make hasty, awkward exits. Lovely barbecue, Tom. We'll just, see ourselves out. Give our best to Amelia. Within minutes, the patio was empty, save for the four of us: my dad, me, a sputtering Brenda, and a completely defeated Mark. "I think you should leave," my dad said to Mark, his voice low and dangerous. Mark didn't need to be told twice. He gave me one last look, a mixture of pure hatred and pathetic pleading, before scurrying away, his car roaring down the street a moment later. Now it was just the three of us. Brenda rounded on me, her face contorted with rage. "I hope you're happy, Maya. I hope you're satisfied. You've ruined your sister's life." "I ruined her life?" I shot back, my own anger flaring. "I didn't lie to her for months. I didn't pretend to be someone I'm not. You're the one who created this toxic environment where success is the only currency that matters. You're the one who taught her that a man's worth is measured by his job title. This is on you, Brenda. You were so desperate for Amelia to have a successful fiancé that you never stopped to ask if he was a good man." "He was a good man," she shrieked. "He was a liar. He built your entire relationship on a foundation of deceit. Is that what you wanted for her? A life lived in a lie as long as it looked good on the outside? This is your fault," she hissed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You and your computer job. You always had to be better than everyone. You couldn't just let her have this one thing." I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Let her have what? A con artist? You're delusional. You're not angry that he lied to Amelia. You're angry that he made you look like a fool." That hit home. Her face crumpled, the rage momentarily replaced by a raw, naked humiliation. She had been publicly bested. Her grand performance had ended in a fiasco. Without another word, she turned and stalked into the house, slamming the sliding glass door behind her. I was left alone with my dad on the silent patio, the air thick with the smell of scorched burgers and shattered illusions. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, dramatic shadows across the lawn. My dad finally broke the silence. "She's right about one thing," he said softly, not looking at me. My heart sank. "What's that?" He turned to face me, and his eyes were filled not with anger, but with a deep, profound sadness. "You did enjoy that, didn't you?" I couldn't lie. Not to him. I nodded, a wave of shame washing over me. "Yes," I whispered. "I did." "I know she's been difficult," he said, struggling for the words. "I know I haven't always stood up for you the way I should have. I let her get away with too much. But Maya, that was your sister. And she's upstairs, heartbroken. Your victory cost her a lot." He was right. The triumphant satisfaction I had felt was already curdling in my stomach, replaced by a sour, bitter guilt. I had exposed a liar and put my stepmother in her place. Yes. But in doing so, I had also publicly humiliated my sister and destroyed her engagement. I had wielded the truth like a weapon, and Amelia had been caught in the crossfire. "I should go talk to her," I said, my voice barely audible. My dad nodded. "Yeah, I think you should." I walked into the quiet house. I could hear the faint sound of sobbing coming from upstairs, from Amelia's childhood bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open gently. She was curled up on her bed, a heap of misery in a pretty summer dress. Her face was buried in a pillow, her shoulders shaking with each sob. The room was a time capsule of her youth: faded pageant ribbons, photos of her and her friends, a giant stuffed unicorn in the corner. It was a room I hadn't set foot in for over a decade. I sat down on the edge of the bed. She didn't look up. "Amelia," I said softly, "I'm sorry." She went still. Then slowly, she pushed herself up, her face red and swollen, her eyes blazing with a pain that cut me to the core. "Sorry?" she spat, her voice thick with tears. "You're sorry? You stood there and you gutted him. You enjoyed it. I saw your face." "I was angry," I said, my own voice trembling. "At him, for lying to you. At Brenda, for being Brenda. I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't mean to?" she cried, her voice rising. Maya, you blew up my entire life on the back patio in front of 15 people. How could you not think that would hurt me? He was deceiving you, Amelia. He wasn't who he said he was. And you think I wouldn't have figured that out? She shot back. You think I'm that stupid? That I needed my brilliant, successful older sister to swoop in and save me? That's not what I thought. Yes, it is, she insisted, tears streaming down her face again. It's what you've always thought, that I'm the dumb one, the pretty one, the one who can't do anything for herself. You've been looking down on me my entire life. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Was that how she saw me? As condescending? As arrogant? I had always seen myself as the victim in our family dynamic, the underdog fighting against Brenda's tyranny. It had never occurred to me that from Amelia's perspective, I might be the villain. That's not true, I whispered, but the words felt hollow even to my own ears. Isn't it? She asked, her voice dripping with a bitterness that must have been festering for years. You left. You went off to your fancy college and your important job and you never looked back. You left me here with her, with Brenda. Do you have any idea what that was like? I flinched. I had to get out, Amelia. She was suffocating me. And you think she wasn't suffocating me? She asked, her voice cracking. Every day it was. Why can't you be more like Maya in school? Maya is so smart, so driven, and then when you left, it switched. You need to find a good man, Amelia. You need to be successful like Maya. I could never win. No matter what I did, I was always being compared to you. You were the ghost that haunted every single one of my accomplishments. I stared at her, my mind reeling. We had been living parallel lives of quiet desperation, each of us feeling like we were on the losing side of a competition we never asked to be in. Brenda hadn't just pitted us against each other in her own mind. She had poisoned our perceptions of each other. My entire life, Amelia continued, her voice raw with pain, has been about trying to get the approval that you got so effortlessly, just by being you. And for a second I thought I had it. Mark. He was my successful fiancé. He was my ticket to finally being good enough in Brenda's eyes. He was my Maya. The confession hung in the air between us, devastating in its honesty. She hadn't been in love with Mark, the man. She had been in love with Mark, the symbol. The symbol of success, of approval, of finally measuring up to the long shadow I had cast over her life. And I had just destroyed it. Amelia, I said, my voice choked with a new, profound guilt. I had no idea. Of course you didn't, she said, her anger deflating, replaced by a weary resignation. You were too busy being perfect. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of 15 years of misunderstanding settling between us. The sister I thought I knew, the popular, carefree, golden child, was a construct. Beneath the surface, she was just as insecure, just as wounded, as I was. We weren't rivals. We were fellow survivors of the same emotional war zone. He told me he was up for a promotion, she said finally, her voice small. He said the director title was practically a done deal. I guess I wanted to believe him. It felt so good to finally have something that would impress Brenda. To impress you. You don't need to impress me, Amelia, I said, my heart aching for her. I'm your sister. Are you? She asked, looking at me with eyes that were clear now, free of tears. Because for the last 10 years, you felt more like a stranger. A really successful, intimidating stranger who I get a Christmas card from once a year. She was right. I had left. I had built my walls so high to protect myself from Brenda that I had inadvertently shut Amelia out too. In my quest to prove my stepmother wrong, I had left my sister behind. I'm sorry, I said again, and this time it felt like the most inadequate word in the English language. I'm so sorry for everything. She just nodded, pulling her knees to her chest. I stayed with her until she fell into an exhausted, fitful sleep. I walked out of her room and found my dad in the kitchen, nursing a glass of whiskey. "How is she?" he asked. "Heartbroken," I said, "and not for the reasons you think." We talked for hours that night, really talked for the first time in years. I told him everything, how Brenda's constant belittling had fueled my ambition, how I had felt like an outsider in my own home. And he listened. He really listened. He told me about his own guilt, his own weakness, how he had been so lost in his own grief after my mom died that he'd latched onto Brenda's strength, and then had been too cowardly to stand up to her when he saw the damage she was doing. "I failed you both," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I let a stranger come into our house and tear my family apart." It wasn't an excuse, but it was an explanation. It was a start. The next morning, I fired Mark. I did it via email, a cold corporate-speak message to his work address. It was impersonal, efficient, and final. He was a liability, and his deception was a clear violation of our company's code of conduct. I didn't feel triumph, just a dull, grim sense of necessity. Brenda didn't speak to me. She moved around the house like a thundercloud, radiating a furious, silent disapproval. The air was thick with unspoken accusations. I was supposed to fly back to San Francisco that afternoon, but I changed my flight. I stayed for another week. Amelia and I spent that week tentatively rebuilding the bridge that had been burned between us. We took long walks, we watched bad movies, we talked. We talked about everything and nothing. We talked about our mother, sharing memories we had both kept locked away. We talked about Brenda, acknowledging the hurt she had caused without letting it consume us. We talked about our hopes, our fears, the lives we wanted to live now that the script had been so violently rewritten. It was awkward and painful and messy, but it was real. For the first time, I saw my sister not as my rival, but as my ally. On my last day, Amelia drove me to the airport. Brenda was still giving me the silent treatment, and my dad gave me a long, tight hug, whispering, "I'm proud of you, not for what you did at the party, but for what you did after." At the gate, Amelia and I stood in an awkward silence. "So, what are you going to do now?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "I don't know," she admitted. "For the first time in my life, I have no idea, and it's terrifying and also kind of exciting." She looked at me and managed a small, genuine smile. "I'm thinking of going back to school. Maybe for graphic design." My heart swelled. "Really?" "Yeah," she said, shrugging. "I was always kind of jealous of you, you know, making things, being creative. I was just too scared to try." "You'd be amazing at it," I said, and I meant it. "And if you ever need a mentor or an internship," she laughed, a real happy sound. "I'll keep that in mind." We hugged, and this time it wasn't awkward at all. It was warm and real and felt like coming home. As I walked down the jet bridge, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I had gone home seeking a petty victory, a final, triumphant, "I told you so." I had gotten it, but it had turned to ash in my mouth. What I found, instead, was something far more valuable. I had lost a battle, but I had won back my sister. And I had finally understood that my success wasn't a weapon to be wielded against my family. It was a gift that I could share. My life wasn't about proving Brenda wrong. It was about building something true and beautiful for myself. And maybe, just maybe, helping my sister do the same. The view from my apartment in San Francisco was still beautiful, but I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that the best view was the one I was leaving behind, the long, winding, and hopeful road back to my family.